I know that a conversation that has bubbled up here and there, I know in the United Church of Christ among our churches, uh, is often surrounding the matter of land acknowledgements. And so I want to hit upon that because I know it's a subject that often comes up. And one of the times it came up was, if some of you may recall, a couple of years ago, a group of indigenous anthropologists issued a statement calling for a moratorium on land acknowledgements, saying that often it did more harm than good, and that created some conversation among some of our churches that have been practicing land acknowledgements. So I'd be curious if you have thoughts on that. I remember there was a webinar just a few months ago called From Land Acknowledgement to Land Back. And so I'd be just kind of curious, thoughts and responses on that matter.
We, as a group, I'm a member of a few different Indigenous-led groups, and we're frequently asked to give land acknowledgements because we're Indigenous people. And a few years ago, it seemed like initially it seemed like a good thing to do. I actually have given some myself. However, when the relationship ends with that acknowledgement of whose land you're on, you're doing more harm than good, because all you're doing is saying, oh, we're acknowledging that we took your land. Why don't you come and speak, most of the time for free, on who we stole it from, and then the relationship ends there. It really needs to be a communication, a conversation, a relationship building. What are you doing for that Indigenous community whose land that you're on, and who you're benefiting from it being stolen from?
Because I was just gonna say it's all talk. It's just like the apologies and the statements that go out whenever our Black lives are snuffed out in the streets. We get a lot of statements and a lot of apologies, but no action goes behind that. And it's the same with land acknowledgement. If it's just that they acknowledge land and we let them go on, there's no further conversations and in a real way, reparations. Let's name it. Let's not beat around the bush on it. If no reparations come behind it, then we've done nothing to repair. It's just all talk. And I believe it was somebody in scripture said that's just sound and brass and tingling cymbals. I don't know. I'm just saying.
Sarah, it looked like you were about to jump in. Did you want to contribute?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to ask Katarina to respond because our coalition made a land acknowledgement guide, and there's something that, Katarina, you're going to be able to describe that much better than I can. And, just a note, I've been asked by leaders in the national church, kind of in the wings, hey, could you do the land acknowledgement today? To which I say no, because that takes time and effort, and I'm not prepared for that. Just because I'm brown doesn't mean I'm going to do a land acknowledgement where I haven't done the research. I'm somewhere away from home, and, I'm not like born knowing how to do that. It takes time and effort, and I would want to reach out to the people there and so on to do a good job of that. So I want to acknowledge, yeah, that happens where people say, hey, you're here, you're Native, you do it. It's like, no, first of all. And second of all, I had the great privilege of leading our Washington State Redistricting Commission in 2021 and 2022. This is when you determine where the lines are going to be drawn for representation in the legislature. And, there was a request that there were people on that commission who wanted to do land acknowledgement. And I said, no, I don't think it's appropriate, because our institution only exists for a year and a half every 10 years and is not able to make an institutional commitment to actually seek redress or repair. And so it's inappropriate. It's just pro forma, and I wouldn't accept that. So I actually value land acknowledgement when it is used as a step towards repair. And so I'd like Katarina to talk about how we are approaching that within the Coalition to Dismantle the Doctrine of Discovery, if you're willing, Katarina.
Sure, Sarah. And as you were talking, I pulled up a certificate that Indigenous advisors, I'll show you in a moment, but Indigenous advisors for the resource that I put in the chat came up with a kind of tongue-in-cheek certificate for congregations that do a land acknowledgement but don't pursue justice. And I think that is really, I think Angie and Sarah's point, the ultimate goal is moving beyond land acknowledgements towards justice. And at the same time, we in our coalition work with a lot of white settler congregations and communities for whom they have grown up in an educational system with Indigenous peoples invisibilized. And their starting step is just learning that they're on Indigenous lands and doing some research around that. Land acknowledgements are sort of an opening step that are already out there and have gained popularity, that have kind of caught on in church communities more and more. And so we figured, why not ride that and sort of use that opportunity and opening to not have that be the ultimate goal. Zacchaeus didn't end with saying, I acknowledge that I stole from people, or I acknowledge that I have unjust gains, and that was his ending point. No, he went forward, and it opened up into something more. There's an awakening that can happen with land acknowledgements and the repetitive reminder that we have an obligation. We are on these lands, naming the peoples that they're on, inviting input when appropriate from local tribal nations, if that's something that they're open to. That is part of, for us, a broader framework of reparative justice, of starting with acknowledging whose lands we're on, but moving towards steps like putting restitution in church budgets, seeking land returns, seeking ways we can be in solidarity with Indigenous people locally and globally. That's part of a framework for a way of joining our coalition called the Repair Network. So we kind of use land acknowledgement statements as an opening, but not an ending point. And I'm just going to share my screen real quick. If you can see this certificate of acknowledgement that some Indigenous advisors recommended that we create. So this is for churches that use land acknowledgements, as Angie or Sarah were saying, as sort of a pat on the back check mark as an ending point. You're welcome to print this out, and it's available in our land acknowledgement guide. We created a land acknowledgement and we have done nothing more. So that is sort of a tongue-in-cheek nudge to push people forward into the repair work that's beyond land acknowledgement.